Today we light the candle of love. Read these words that Jesus quoted of himself to remind us of what we are waiting for. This is from Isaiah 61, the first 4 verses and verses 7 and 9 if you're following along. The Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is on me, because the Lord has anointed me to preach good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for the captives and release from darkness for the prisoners, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor and the day of vengeance of our God.
To comfort those who mourn and provide for those who grieve in Zion, to bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of gladness instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of despair. They will be called oaks of righteousness, a planting of the Lord for the display of his splendor.
Instead of their shame, my people will receive a double portion, and instead of disgrace, they will rejoice in their inheritance. And so they will inherit a double portion in their land, and everlasting joy will be theirs. For I, the Lord, love justice. I hate robbery and iniquity. In my faithfulness I will reward them and make an everlasting covenant with them. Their descendants will be known among the nations, and their offspring among the peoples. All who see them will acknowledge that they are the people the Lord has blessed.
Please stand and sing with me. Said the night wind to the little lamb, do you see what I see? Way up in the sky, little lamb, do you see what I see? A star, dancing in the night with a tail as big as a kite, with a tail as big as a kite. Said the little lamb to the shepherd boy, do you hear what I hear? Ringing through the sky, shepherd boy, do you hear what I hear? A song, high above the trees, with a voice as big as the sea, with a voice as big as the sea. Said the shepherd boy to the mighty king, do you know what I know? In your palace for mighty king, do you know what I know? A child shivers in the cold. Let us bring him silver and gold. Let us bring him silver and gold. Said the king to the people everywhere, listen to what I say. Pray for peace, people everywhere. Listen to what I say. please have a seat? You are about to enjoy a play called The Wandering Wise, about 3 weary travelers on their journey towards a star.
Guys, can we stop for a bit? My feet are killing me. I've lost track of how many blisters I have.
We can stop for 1 minute. You know, I've been counting every step we've taken, but my blisters, they've been doing multiplication.
Well, let me tell you, my feet are a rich historical landscape spanning across 3 generations of blisters. So yes, let's take a break.
Guys, there should be 6 figs in here, 2 for each of us. I only see 5.
That's because, Raj, not every fig weighs exactly 8.4 grams. You need to adjust for variation.
You don't think I know that? I wrote the scroll on statistical variation.
Just saying, sometimes your expertise doesn't translate well to the real world.
Guys, I can spare a fig till we get to the next village, but please tell me we're getting closer to that star.
I wasn't going to say anything. I feel like it's an unpopular opinion. I think we're going the wrong way.
Oh, how can you say that? We've been following that star for weeks. Can't you see the star? We're going the right way.
That is the right star. It's in the same original position according to the constellations. But
Thank you.
Are my eyes deceiving me? Is it getting less bright?
Are you guys blind? The star's right in front of us. We're on the right. Oh, I see how it is. You guys don't trust my abilities to do calculations for astral bodies. Fine.
Nobody said that. We just want to check your work. You know, make sure all this traveling and discomfort is worthwhile.
Right, to know we're going the right direction, that we're on the right path, and that your calculated coordinates are accurate. We just want some reassurances.
There are no reassurances. We're following a star in the sky. We don't have a map. We don't have a road. We're the first people on this journey. You know, if maybe, why don't you ask your constellation god friends for better directions?
Actually, I think the star gods are a little annoyed right now. That big and bright star has really ruffled things up a bit.
Great. So we're just walking around in circles, hoping that one day a star is going to tell us where to go. Go over here, through this valley. Go climb that mountain. How about go home?
That's a great idea, Ben. Why don't you take your historical anecdotes and your smelly feet and the missing fig and go home?
No, you're not really going to leave, are you? I mean, your feet don't smell that bad, and I took the fig.
Well, I can't just leave you guys now, can I?
This isn't easy for me either. Do you know why I went into mathematics? I like precision, formulas, predictability. This has none of that. These prophecies, this journey, we don't know if this prophecy is even going to become reality. If the prophecy becomes true, we don't even really know what that means. Here we are, though. We're on this journey. We're hoping that we're going to witness something significant, something historical. Aren't you the one who told me that, Ben?
I did, but it's not exactly normal within my profession to predict historical moments.
But nothing is normal now. Don't you see? The cosmos are rejoicing. The King of the Jews has been born. Your people's king, your people's hope, your people's freedom. Tell me, have you ever looked up at the sky and seen such a star?
Perhaps I've just been staring at this star for too long. I'd forgotten how truly magnificent it is. I'm just so tired of this wilderness. So tired of hoping things will be different, that things will change, that one day we'll know peace. I'm exhausted. Every bone and muscle in my body is aching. My feet are burning and my mind is busy. What if we're going the wrong way? What if we miss this event entirely? What if we're just wrong? That there is no hope. There is no promised child. The star is just a bright star.
That's entirely possible. There's always a margin of error. We're human.
But can't you feel it? I feel it in my bones, in my gut, that something has shifted. I don't quite have the right words for it, but I feel it. I know it. Something has changed.
Well, not everyone is so intergalactically in tuned as you, Dorothy. But the prophecy is there in the manuscripts. I just can't seem to fully understand them yet.
Me neither. You know, I see this journey, this prophecy, it's a hypothesis, and we are testing that hypothesis. That's all we can do. Keep asking your questions, Ben. Keeps us on our toes. Speaking of which, my toes feeling a little bit better. Shall we continue on our path?
Sounds good.
Sure thing. Thanks for the chat, you guys. I just don't want to set myself up for disappointment, you know?
You know, I know how you feel, but this God, the God of the sun and the stars, has this Yahweh ever broken a promise?
I guess we'll have to wait and see now, won't we?
So just to let you know, that was written and directed by our very own Steph Croker. So very cool, and we're very grateful for her vision and insight into how to bring some things to life in our community. So thank you, Steph, and you can talk to her after about that, about the process of that. And we also had a lot of help from Val Lesky, who came and helped us work through it and workshop it, and so we're just really grateful for that as well. So, Advent creates people, all new people. That's what Bonhoeffer said, Dietrich Bonhoeffer. And this small quote endlessly fascinates me, the claim of it, really. Advent creates people, new people? How and why? What is going on in Advent? And what is it about Advent that has that sort of potential to transform? And of course I believe it, even as I question it. I do think there's something about hoping in the darkness, about making peace in the polarization, and declaring joy in the disconnection, and love in the indifference. I do believe there's power in practicing the ways of waiting, like we've been talking about, of practicing that prophetic yielding and accepting. And then we get to this week, and I believe that there's power in this week's Advent theme, which is that of journeying. There is power in consciously entering a time of journey, of necessary leaving of home and all you're used to, and getting onto the road, right? There's a reason we called ourselves the road. And I wonder how journeying creates people, all new people. And we love journeying as a species. We love to talk about journeying. We're obsessed with writing and creating and telling stories of journeys, and we've been doing so, I think, since we've been creating stories as humans. We have Homer's epic poem, The Odyssey, that was written 500 or 800 years before Christ. We have The Lord of the Rings, and this could have been a Lord of the Rings sermon, but I didn't do that because I think that was the natural go-to if I was going to talk about a journey. But we recognize in our deepest selves in these stories of journey. Brad, my husband, and I were chatting last week, and we were just naming movies about journeys. And literally, he came up with this list in 5 minutes. I don't know if it's up there. There we go. Look at that. He was just like, all these journeys. There's so many different kinds of journeys. Journeys to save someone, journeys to save the world, journeys to find something. Which one? It's a journey. It's a journey. It's one of our favorites. There's journeys to find treasure, journeys to find artifacts, journeys to find a miracle or a secret or a person, journeys to battle something, journeys where you get lost, journeys where you discover, journeys taken with a motley band of companions where what is learned on the road becomes infinitely more important than what you thought you were doing. Little Miss Sunshine is my favorite example of that. We tell stories about journeys because we know there's something absolutely true about the potential for transformation within them. And we tell them because we need to tell each other that the journey is worth it. And we need to tell each other that we're going to get through whatever journey we're on. And we need to tell each other that dragons get defeated. And we need to tell each other that love does win. So back to this phrase, Advent creates people, all new people. Not only does that claim fascinate me and draw me in and get me to ask, really? But the person who wrote it has captivated me, and he's captivated my imagination these last few years. And I want to talk about a journey that he took, one that indeed shaped him to see something more than just a nice tradition in Advent. And he got him ready to meet the Christ child there in this exact world. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Dietrich Bonhoeffer, his life and his story and his journey. And I want to wonder with you about what it might spur for your journey this Advent. So Dietrich Bonhoeffer was born in 1906 in Germany. He was a Lutheran German pastor and theologian, and he is famous for resisting the Nazis. That's what he's known for. He resisted what they were doing. He was eventually arrested, and he was kept in prison, and then he was transferred to a concentration camp, and then he was executed in April 1945, about 6 weeks before the Nazi regime finally fell. There's talk about he could hear American guns from his cell. And he stands in this unique place in history as one of the few Christians who saw the rise of Hitler and National Socialism for what it was at the beginning, and he resisted it. He lost his preaching privileges because of his opposition to the Reich. He was part of this network of resisting Christian churches called the Confessing Church in Germany. He did have this job in military intelligence, in the military intelligence wing of the regime. He was kind of subverting it for a while. And his proximity there to some people who were wanting to overthrow Hitler was what got him arrested. And he wasn't the only Christian who resisted, but we know him because he wrote a lot about what was going on, about his imprisonment, about his ethics that he was learning, about community, and about Christ. And so we have this work to look at. I kind of just wanted to share a few of his words that we have to kind of get across the teaching and living that he was about. So during the time of his resistance, he wrote this: "Nothing that we despise in other men is inherently absent from ourselves. We must learn to regard people less in the light of what they do or omit to do, but more in the light of what they suffer." He wrote, "Judging others makes us blind, whereas love is illuminating. By judging others, we blind ourselves to our own evil and to the grace which others are just as entitled to as we are." He wrote, "Cheap grace is the grace we often give ourselves. Cheap grace is the preaching of forgiveness without requiring repentance," which means walking in a different way. Remember, he's saying this in 1930s Germany. He wrote, "When Christ calls a man, he bids him to come and die. We are not to simply bandage the wounds of victims beneath the wheels of injustice. We are to drive a spoke into the wheel itself. He wrote, "This is not about hero worship, but intimacy with Christ." He wrote, "The church is only the church. The church is the church only when it exists for others, not dominating, but helping and serving. It must tell men of every calling what it means to live for Christ, to exist for others. Christianity preaches the infinite worth of that which is seemingly worthless and the infinite worthlessness of that which is seemingly so valued." And he wrote this, "God's compassion can and must be heard as God's last word, or it will not be heard at all. There is no word of God which goes beyond his word of grace." So we hold him up. We hold him up as this beacon of courageous resistance and clarifying theology in what we now know is this deeply oppressive, deeply horrific time. His writings about being a Christ-shaped person in the world in that time and that war are profound and really challenging. But there is this question that kind of keeps rising up for me, because I think it's a question that I want to ask myself now. But the question is, why did he not follow the path of most German ministers during the Weimar Republic, during the Nazi rise, during the war, during the Holocaust? Why was he able to resist even unto his own death? Why was he able to clearly see in those times what so many others were not, or not at least until it was far, far too late? And my thought is I think it's because he went on a journey, a literal journey, one that he began kind of looking for adventure and maybe a career boost, but ended up radically transforming him. So I want to expand even a little more and give you a little more context as to how Bonhoeffer found himself. He was part of this well-educated middle-class elite in Germany, and by the time he was 14, he wanted to be a minister. He knew that. He wanted to be part of the church. His brother had been killed in World War I. It had affected his family. He wanted to do this. But the context of the German church at the time was a specific thing that we should be aware of. Bonhoeffer was shaped by a German religion, hundreds years past that Reformation where Martin Luther reformed stuff. I didn't prepare what exactly he did. Martin Luther nailed things to a wall or a door, and this is hundreds of years later, and now the German religion, kind of cultural religion, it's this nod of Lutheranism, but also kind of nationalism, and it kind of fuses into this strange triumphalistic understanding of themselves being at the center of God's history. And then you kind of add to that like the First World War, the trauma, and the shame of the loss and all the violence there. And then you add to that kind of the hunger, like literal hunger that Germany was experiencing at that time. And there's this deep divide in Christian culture in Germany between their personal faith and then what happens in the social sphere. And that divide, as historian Reggie Williams writes, it can leave one susceptible to thinking that your social norms are your Christian norms, and that Christian norms are your social norms. And there's this big reliance in German theology at the time of the concept of orders of creation. This was a big thing they all talked about, that God created hierarchies. So this, and then he created this, and then he created this, and then humans are at the top, and, well, it lends itself well to this kind of human is at the top. And that's how God wanted it. That's how God ordered it, right? That then becomes a theological rationale for things like that racial superiority, a pure Volk. Volk is a word for people, like folk, like Volkswagen. So if I say Volk, that's what it means, a people. But you can see how their theology was starting to lend itself into, or it just kind of led into a really easy way of going along with what was going on in the social sphere. And Bonhoeffer was a product of these times. Before he went on his journey, he claimed that Christ was everything. He would preach this, Christ is everything. But the substance of that everything was tethered to this nationalism in German culture. And he gave a lecture in 1929 about ethics, where he wrote this. He wrote, "Should not a Volk, a people, experiencing God's call on its own life and its own youth and in its own strength, should not such a people be allowed to follow that call, even if it disregards the lives of other people? God is the Lord of history." Okay. He also wrote this, "Love is limited. It is an utter perversion to believe that my first duty is to love my enemy. Is it not possible to love my enemy? It is not possible to love my enemy and my people. What I am through my people. So what I have should belong with my people. That is the divine order of things. So this was Bonhoeffer pre-journey. Had he continued on this path, he could have likely found himself in the same situation as thousands of other pastors in the 30s and 40s, trying to appease this increasingly violent nationalism, increasingly demanded more and more to the point of hating, torturing, denigrating your neighbor for the sake of your own people. But Bonhoeffer didn't continue on this path. His thinking was saved, as his best friend Ebelhard put it, by what happened when Bonhoeffer went on a journey. So in 1930, Bonhoeffer couldn't quite decide what to do with his life. He wasn't loving being a pastor, and he wasn't sure about being a professor. Maybe I should do this. He had offers from Berlin University to teach there. And he was in a theological crisis of sorts. He was looking for something, but he couldn't even really name what it was he was looking for. So, this is what I say, in classic nerd having a faith crisis style, he chose to go do more school rather than make a career choice. And I can make that joke because that's exactly what I did too. So he chooses to do more school, and he takes this year-long fellowship to Union Theological Seminary in New York City. They offered 3 fellowships to Europeans every year. He got one of them, and so off he gets on a boat and goes to New York. So at 24 years old in 1930, he steps off the boat in New York 1 year after the stock market had crashed, right? So that worldwide depression's coming for everyone. There is real hunger, there's true economic despair, and it resembled post-war Germany. And theologically, what he met in the churches that he would go to, the Protestant churches involved with Union, was that the search for truth and dogmatics and doctrines that was really prevalent in Germany had kind of been replaced in America by the search for pragmatics and utility and be your best self kind of faith. And Bonhoeffer found that the Christians he first met in America were doing what the Germans had done. They'd kind of syncretized their Christian identity with their nation's economic and power values, making no distinction between human achievement and industry and individualism and Western civilization and Christianity. It's kind of the same. It's different than what was going on in Germany, but it was similar. And he wrote to friends that he was disappointed by what he was seeing in religion in America. Until one day, a new friend at Union invited him to go to his church. And this friend was Albert Franklin Fisher. He was the 6th son of an Alabama African-American preaching family. So, African-American, Alabama, 1930s. Fisher's grandparents had been slaves, and he grew up in the height of lynchings of blacks in America. So, between 1870 and 1930, there was 5,000 extrajudicial lynchings of black people in the States. And so this is what Fisher has grown up in. When Fisher's church in 1914 wanted to take a group of kids from their church to the Birmingham Zoo, local whites got caught wind of this, and they sent letters saying exactly what the violence they would do to the children if they dared go to the zoo. So they didn't go. This was Fisher's world. So here's the thing. Fisher, his faith did not see the status quo of their culture as being part and parcel of being a Christian. For him, he had to live differently. And so he understood Christ differently. He understood Christ's body, the church, differently. And it was here, finally here at this church, that Bonhoeffer was introduced to a Christian worship with an inherently different view of society, one where Christians saw Christ with an intimate awareness of human suffering. Albert invited Dietrich to church, and so he went to Harlem and became a regular attendee and participant of the Abyssinian Baptist Church, and here Bonhoeffer was changed. Here was a group of Christ followers that weren't tethered to American or German cultures of achievement, ingenuity, and exceptionalism and supremacy. Here he began to hear the Bible, particularly the Gospels, in a new way. He began to see Christ, the Christ he'd been studying his whole life, through the lens of these people. And suddenly the Sermon on the Mount, right? Blessed are the weak, blessed are the poor, blessed are the humble, blessed are the merciful. Suddenly Christ meant something different than this tribe we belong to. And the call of Christians became a call to turn from unloving ways to loving the Imago Dei in each person in front of them. And suddenly grace is not this abstract thing, right? Christ's work is not about an idea you have or agreeing to a statement. Suddenly, grace is this costly solidarity that God does with us, showing us what love looks like fleshed out. And it requires not just a change of mind about doctrine or dogma, but changing the way one lives so that it looks like Jesus, even when Jesus says, love your enemy. It's the way of Jesus, not the words about Jesus, but the literal way of Jesus what captivated Bonhoeffer so utterly in this time. And that journey across the ocean literally changed Bonhoeffer, and he returned to Germany different. Here's how he wrote of himself a few years later. Years later, I threw myself into my work in an extremely unchristian and not at all humble fashion. A rather crazy element of ambition, which some people noticed in me, made my life difficult and withdrew me from the love and the trust of those around me. At that time, I was terrible. Something that has changed and transformed my life. For the first time, I came to the Bible. That too is an awful thing to say because I had often preached and I had seen a great deal of the church and had spoken and written about it, and yet I was not yet a Christian, but rather in an utterly wild and uncontrolled fashion, my own master. I do know that at that time, I turned the cause of Jesus Christ into an advantage for myself. But the Bible, especially the Sermon on the Mount, freed me from all this. And since then, everything has changed. I have felt this plainly, and so have other people around me. I do believe I'm on the right track for the first time in my life. Bonhoeffer returned to Germany, and it was in trouble. He could not go on as before. And he found himself helping to shape the resistance to the cultural German Christianity that literally they made Hitler the head of their church a few years later. In 1935, a group of like-minded pastors, they tried to write a confession. We know all about confessions. So they tried to write this document of this is what we believe in regards to this National Socialism. And Bonhoeffer was the only one who argued for a clause about anti-Semitism and racism, because it was rampant in the church. And his words were defeated even by these other resistors for being too much, right? They didn't see the race stuff as a problem. Bonhoeffer in the end refused to even sign that document. His Christ-centered resistance was too radical even for the resistors. That journey that he had been on wrecked him for polite German society, and yet it utterly buoyed him and sustained him in the face of the violence that was to come. Really shortly before his arrest in 1942, he wrote these words: "It remains an experience of incomparable value that we have for once learned to see the great events of world history from below, from the perspective of the outcasts, the suspects, the maltreated, the powerless, the oppressed, and the reviled, in short, from the perspective of suffering. That we come to see matters great and small, happiness and misfortune, strength and weakness with new eyes, that our sense for greatness, humanness, justice, and mercy has grown freer, more incorruptible." His transformation came by way of a journey, literal journey in this case. He saw new things, he saw unexpected things, he talked, he worshiped, he asked a lot of questions, he ate with people that in his own context in Germany and in the context of America were not his equals, and yet there he saw Christ for the first time. He could now write things like this in 1935 about Advent. "In 8 days, we shall celebrate Christmas. And now for once, let us make it really a festival of Christ in our world. We must prepare ourselves by getting rid of something that plays a great role in our lives, the desire that men have that they might have greater power. God's thoughts are opposite. He desires to be even lower, unnoticed, in self-forgetfulness, in insignificance, in worthlessness, not wishing to be high. And it is on this road that we meet with God himself. Every one of us lives side by side with some we call great and some we call low. Every one of us has someone who is below us. Is it even possible that this Christmas we could rethink this radical point, learning and knowing that our way, insofar as it is the way to God, leads us not to the high and mighty, but really to the humble and poor? God is not mocked. It is not a light thing to God that every year we celebrate Christmas and do not take it seriously. His word holds and is certain. When he comes in his glory and power into the world in the manger, he will put down the mighty from their seats. Who of us would want to celebrate Christmas correctly? Who will finally lay at the manger all power, all honor, all reputation, all vanity, all pride, and all selfishness? Who is content to be low and let God alone be high? God travels wonderful ways with human beings, but he does not comply with views and opinions of people. God does not go the way that people want to prescribe for him. Rather, his way is beyond all comprehension, free and self-determined beyond all proof. Where reason is indignant, where our nature rebels, where our piously, anxiously keeps us away, that is precisely where God loves to be. There he confounds the reason of the reasonable. There he aggravates our nature, our piety. That is where he wants to be, and no one can keep him from it. Advent creates people, all new people. Something happened while journeying, physically and spiritually, for him that got him ready to meet that Christ child, the Christ child that confounds the reason, right? And something happens to us that gets us ready to meet the Christ child in this world when we undergo journeying, even in Advent. So journeys can be literal journeys, traveling away from your home. They can be interior, spiritual, emotional ones. Either way, anyway, they're going to involve a necessary leaving of what is safe and predictable, what's status quo. Either way, they're going to involve encountering places and people and questions you did not expect. The journey, there and back again, like all the stories say, it's going to transform us if we let it. We are transformed by what we unlearn about what we think we know. We are transformed by the grace that we will find ourselves in desperate need of when we're on a journey. We are transformed by the gifts just freely given to us on the journey, and mostly we're transformed by who we encounter. The journey will give us so many opportunities to examine ourselves and what we think we know and look deeper for the one I think we're actually looking for. Our scriptures are essentially all journeys. It's all journey stories, out from the garden, into Egypt, through the wilderness, into the promised land, back into exile, right? And in this season, we have Mary's journey to Elizabeth, the journey they take to Bethlehem, the journey of the Magi, the journey into Egypt, the journey back again to Nazareth. This life with God is all journey. And the gift, as our friends dramatized earlier, is that we're not alone in it. Others will be with us, encouraging us when we need it, giving us doses of reality when we need it, reminding us of hope when we need it. And there will come a time on every journey when we have a choice, right? Like Mary and Joseph had a choice, like the Magi had a choice. Bonhoeffer said, meeting Jesus is an encounter with a decision. It's an encounter with God's decision, because we're going to encounter God's decision to do it this way. We get to decide how we yield to that journey and how we will let it change us and unlearn us. We might even become new people, a new creation. Advent, as Bonhoeffer knew, is a really good time to live into that and to take God seriously and to prepare to meet God as he has chosen to come. And here's the thing, God does not leave us alone in this journey. In fact, the transformation is not even your initiative. It's God's. This is all God's thing. The divine power of the cosmos, perfectly imaged in Jesus. That's God's thing the whole way through. And I think maybe it's just the vulnerability of the journey, of the vulnerability of our defenses being down, and the vulnerability of not being the expert in every room, the inability to rule our days, but only just receive from it, the vulnerability of being away from home. Maybe it's that finally makes us able to hear it. God is doing his work in Advent. I have to believe this as I read way too much news and I see what's going on. God is doing his work in Advent, and I think he's laying the groundwork. This is what we're doing in Advent, to receive God as an unexpected child. And we can prepare to encounter it by saying yes to the journey. I don't know if Jess had planned this. She's not even in here when she read Jeremiah 29, but I'm ending with Jeremiah 29. Funny how that happens, but in the writings of the prophet Jeremiah, When God's people were exiled, they were on a journey that was not of their own choosing, but it was still a journey where they were learning a lot, unlearning a lot. The Creator did have a word for them. He wanted them to embrace where they were, to make the most of it in Babylon. He wanted them to know that he was with them even as they were far from home and they didn't know how the story was going to end. And so I want to leave us with these words today for the journey today. Do not let the prophets and diviners among you deceive you. Do not listen to the dreams you encourage them to have. They are prophesying lies to you in my name. I have not sent them. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you a hope and a future. Then you will call on me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart. I will be found by you, declares the Lord, and will bring you back. And in this season, what are you seeking? This is the question before us. What is the quest you're on, the journeying that you've been on? Because it's there in the seeking, in that one step in front of the other, that you're going to be met. God will be found by you. And it won't be what you thought it was going to be. You might be changed. And so the question before us all, I think, this Advent is, are you going to go and see the journey through wherever it leads? Let's pray. God, your good news. You've said it to us a lot in those scriptures. It is good news to the poor and not great news to those who think they know it all. Unfortunately, it's just that way. And so, God, you have committed to taking us each on a journey to bring us to you. However we need to hear this, I pray your Spirit would speak to us this Sunday. And I pray that our souls would be encouraged by knowing that you are with us, even in the painful unlearning parts, even in the scary parts where our new awareness of what it means to look to you, to lay things down at this manger, to know that you are the way God works in the world. You are God's decision. That's going to bring us up against some things in our culture. Even when that's scary, help us know that you are with us, that you will be found by us. You will bring us back. You will lead us to the place we are wanting to go, which is a sense of home, but not home as it's always been, but home with you. So God, we just pray for our journeys. We know you are with us and we're grateful. Help the questions of Bonhoeffer, of his story. Help us to live those questions and have mercy on us as we do. In your name we pray. Amen.
Hi, my name is Rich, and I'm also one of the pastors here. And what a privilege that we have to celebrate communion with one another. You know, when we celebrate communion, we enter into this profound mystery, especially appropriate at Advent, of God with us. And this motif of the journey that Jackie has helped us reflect on, the journey of Bonhoeffer, the journey of the Magi that we witnessed imaginatively earlier on, and the journey of, I don't know, Shaun of the Dead and Little Miss Sunshine and everything in between. But each of us is on a journey, and each of us is invited to know that mysterious truth that God is with us, that God not only is our guide on the journey, but that in our desperation and need for being equipped on that journey, he himself, Christ himself, is the content as well as the guide of our journey. And so the invitation to the table this morning is the invitation that Jesus always offers again and again. Come, be a part of this. I want you, my friends, my brothers, my sisters, to be a part of this. That same invitation is the invitation for each of us to accept what God is doing in our midst, to accept him as the content and everything we need on the journey that each of us is on, both that we're on as individuals and that we're on collectively. So in a minute, I'm going to invite folks to come up, and you can just take a minute where you're at and come up whenever you're ready. And also sort of, we'll have the trays. So we still have our COVID safe, everything is separate trays. So you'll go ahead and in the little cup that you'll get, there's a little bit of bread as well as juice, AKA wine, but it's juice. And just, you can take that with you. You can have it right away, or you can bring it to your seat, whatever sounds or whatever feels more comfortable. All right. So on the night that Jesus was betrayed, he took bread and he gave thanks to God, who provides all things, everything we need on the journey, and just everything we need. And he broke it. It's not as dramatic when you have the one hand on the mic. He broke it and he said, "This is my body, which is for you. Do this in remembrance of me." In the same way, after supper, he took the cup and he poured it out. And he offered it to his disciples, his friends. And he said, "This cup is the cup of the new covenant, which is in my blood. Do this whenever you drink it in remembrance of me." And as the Apostle Paul reminded us, whenever we take this bread and drink this cup, we proclaim the Lord's death until he comes again. So people loved by God, who are invited to this table because of God's grace, not because of the Road Church or anyone else, come, take, eat, and drink. Know and believe that the body and blood of Christ is completely sufficient for everything we need for the forgiveness of sins and for the invitation to join God on the journey.